Well, that then leads us on to a perfect segue. Thank you for dropping the Transatlantis Games name. Onto Duncan Rhodes Two Thin Coats Paints. Wave 2.
Wave 2.
Yeah.
Now, before we do go into it, there's been a bit of speculation from myself. I don't think it's really from the community. There's one or two other people who are in the chat that might be saying it. I thought Transatlantis Games were a UK company originally.
Sort of. Kind of. So they are owned by Bob Watts, who is American, and he was, previous times he was working, well, basically he was the CEO of Privateer Press. And he's the kind of guy who, you meet people who basically their entire career is being CEOs of companies.
Right, yeah.
And
like Alan Sugar.
I don't know how he's done it. Like the first one he owned was, or ran, I'm not sure if he owned it, but he definitely was in with it. It was Grenadier Miniatures, and people might have heard of these from years back.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Star Wars figures, like little 20mm Star Wars figures and things. And he's just had this career of just running businesses and things. And he's at the point where he's like, I want to do my own one now rather than running somebody else's. So that's what Transatlantis Games is. And because he has, through his career, he then owns a warehouse and a factory in the UK, he decided to make the company sort of straddled across the pond, essentially. So it's got things in both sides. Now, the factory where all the paints have been bottled and everything and all of it's come together and packed and sent out, that is in the UK. So, it's sort of both.
Yeah. Yes, because when Wave 1 was happening during the Kickstarter, I went to Transatlantis Games' website to see if I could become a trader of the product. And, yeah, it was... I could have sworn back then it said Transatlantis Games Ltd., with a UK address. Now, if you go back to it, it says LLC with a, is it Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Philadelphia address. And I was like, I wonder when that happened. But it would just appear that it's was always the case, just had different addresses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Quite silhouetted with the sun coming out behind me.
It's the holy light of Duncan.
Turning it into dark Duncan. So it's... it was all started, I think, well, the business was founded in the UK, but I'm not sure exactly where, the core of it would be, or whether it's two companies or how exactly Bob runs.
One probably owns the other one.
Yeah, but he's definitely got a foot in both locations. So, there's, I know that a bunch of the things are in stock, not in stock, but he has some things there, and there's also things in the UK. Now, the majority of the stuff is in the UK, and then he ships it around to different points from there. Yeah.
So, before we go on to Wave 2, do you want to give us... I was constantly... Because I was one of the top-tier backers for Wave 1, I got all of the updates from Transatlantis Games and everything, how everything went. Now, is there anything that you could say about Wave 1 that we might not have heard? If not, that's fine. And then I'll go on to give you some feedback of what we've seen in terms of the uptake since Wave 1.
And also as well, what did you learn from Wave 1 that you may have done, maybe gone about differently when implementing Wave 2?
Yeah.
Well, so Wave 2, so it's a bit of a complex question, that. So essentially Wave 1... I'll tell you the story of how it all started. Basically, Bob approached us a number of years ago now with a proposal, and it was all a full presentation thing about his ideas and stuff like this. We always knew that we'd like to have some products and things to go alongside what we do, and we always wanted it. Anything we made, we're very particular about making it as high a quality as we can. And it's because, everything that we've done, all the videos and things, we've always tried to be completely honest and give it our best, because I don't want to get the feel badsies of trying to just offload something cheap, and just try and make a quick buck or anything. If we're going to make a living, we want to do it honestly. So when Bob gave us this proposal, it was very much like, here's a colour wheel, we just have colours from it, some little samples of some ideas and things like that. And our response was, this sounds cool, but we'd like to develop it. If we're going in this much, we'd like to develop something in a more structured way like this, because we know that when people are... Our main audience are people who are looking to improve their things, and they come in new, which means that we'd like a range to be developed with that sort of thing in mind, to try and make the process easier. So with that in mind, we'd like to do it as like triads and things like that. And Bob goes, "That's amazing," and basically bit our hand off. And so
you want to help me run this idea? Yes, I will do that.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like, yeah, triads, that's cool. I went, okay, so because we're doing it like that, we'd probably need at least like 30 colours bare minimum if you're looking to, because he wants to make his own range, because Transatlantis wants to develop more things, more products and stuff. He wants to have a hobby range to be like a core thing to really get going, it's like a nice constant thing. So like, oh yeah, so all right, with that kind of thing in mind, basically 30 minimum, but you know what, if you want to make like a range, you need more than that. So Bob's like, oh, how many? Like, well, maybe 48. We've listed these initial triads and things like that, and we got up to the metallics and things, and like that. And then he's like, oh, okay, are you sure? I'm like, well, we did think of some other ideas for colours which would be really good to have as well. And he's like, okay, how many is that? 60? Okay. So we're like, now we can, this is like, so what we then had, he basically let us just go. Now, my fear was, you ever seen that episode of Simpsons where Homer is employed by his brother to design a car?
Yeah, and he does the bubble
like
thing on the front and the back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, part of me was like, oh God, what if? Like, I'm not thinking about it as a money making.
You're thinking about it as a hobbyist.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And I'm like, what if it comes out as awful? But as it turns out, what then happened was, so it says 60, so it's like, all right, so we've got to make sure these 60 are correct. So we did a lot of, tweaking and adjusting and stuff like that. And it basically had to be a core of a range. And so it became highly competitive as to what colours could be in there. Because we had to think of, all right, all the things we paint, what do we use all the time? Well, there's a bunch of these sort of neutral khaki kind of colours and things which we can't really do without, so they got to be in there. And we've got to have your primary secondary colours. You've got to have gold and silver. You've got to have a variety of browns. So it all got hammered out that way. But then we knew there's all this other stuff that you need if you're painting things. Like, it's a great range, but if you wanted to paint a Astra Militarum army, for example, right, you need military greens. But we have no room for military greens. So we do have the sort of emerald greens, but we don't have that. So there's a whole list of other things that we would like, but we knew that would have to be kept. And going beyond 60 colours was really pushing it to get things going. So we're like, all right, so, all going well, we know that we can expand it into this lot, and then that basically becomes a whole rounded range. So we always knew that was waiting in the wings.
Your wave 2 was always coming.
Exactly, yeah. So the holes that we saw in wave 1, we knew that were not really holes because we'd already prepared things. And we started getting feedback from people saying, what about these colours? And we were like, okay, well, we could adjust that. And it all just ended up slotting nicely into a second set of 60.
Yeah. It's like not every project needs magenta, but eventually you're going to need magenta.
Yes,
for
exactly.
something.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
One of the first colours that I... so I'm actually religiously only painting with two-thin coats right now. Basically, I'm going through the range. And the one thing that I do with all of my dropper bottles is the second I open that dropper bottle for the first time is that lid goes into the paint so that I can have an instant colour of what it actually dries to on the top of the bottle. But the first colour I had to mix because I didn't have it was verdigris. So I used, I've got the range here, 1 minute. Elysian blue and the green wash. Mixed them two together and it made a perfect verdigris colour. And because it's mixed with the wash, it actually went on really well. Yeah. So it was actually really done quite well, and I was really pleased with that.
Good
but wave 2, one of the daily unlocks was the verdigris effect, which I was proper happy with.
That's right. So effects, and also there's also the turquoisey kind of colours in amongst the main range too. So if you want to do it in a more hand-controlled way, where you're actually diluting the paint using multiple shades, there's also that option too. So, it really, like I say, we knew the first Kickstarter was sort of half the thing, but you could mix things and you could get by with it. But me, for example, I really like using maroons and things. So in Wave 2, there's lots of maroons. But I had to do without because it's not as important as having your main, more vibrant mid-red. So, it was a tough choice with the first one. But also in the development of it, again, we just got sent. Bob arranged what was going on, and what I'd received through the post was, first of all, a number of what we call a base. So that's basically the paint but no colour in it, and they sent white and black. like just white and black. And there was, I think, 4 samples of each, so A, B, C, D. And what I had to do was just test them and decide which base I liked. And so I picked them. It's like, oh, I'll go with that one. That's really cool. And then for our highlights, we'll have that one. And, we made tweaks and stuff afterwards. But what I didn't realise, and I had no idea, and Bob certainly didn't say anything, was that I ended up picking the most expensive base that was the best quality. Right? I was like, oh, this is brilliant. So what we ended up with was a set of paints so the ingredients that go into them are like really high quality. And I didn't know, so I was just like, I just really like this green to cover, because greens are this sort of shade I've used before, don't cover very well, so can you do it? And the factory's like, oh, here you go, what do you think of this? Oh, brilliant, we just tweak it a little bit like that, we did it back and forth, oh, fantastic, there it is. And what I didn't realise is that, it's actually really expensive to make it. So I think this is, during the Kickstarter campaign, I mean, bear in mind at the time, I didn't understand why this was like this. I just thought, well, they just picked good stuff, right? But it's hard to describe. Why should you back this Kickstarter? Oh, it's because the paints are really good. They flow really well and they cover really well. And it's like, okay, yeah, but other paints do cover. And you thin them down, they go thick and stuff. And then you try ours and you realise they're silky smooth, and that is purely because the quality ingredients that go into it, which also means they're expensive to make. So yeah, that's why that is.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on the quality of the paint. I say it to almost everyone that asks me about painting, it is the best flow and the best coverage of a paint that I've ever used.
Yeah, I mean, I only have a few of the paints because I've got 30 years of backlog paint that I'm slowly going to be replacing. Like your bright silver, that like the lightest of the 3 silvers there. I use that almost exclusively for highlighting my silver now, and it flows. One of the best silvers I've ever used for edge highlighting.
Before toothing coats, I actually used the Vallejo metal colour, which is their airbrush range, and the just a plain aluminium silver, because it was really bright. But the problem with that is so thin.
It's really thin.
that it just went everywhere.
Yeah.
But now, if real silver is just
and it's really nice because as Twitch streamers and that, we're part of the Twitch community and that, and the more streamers and that I see now, I go over there. Oh, they're now using Duncan's paints. Oh, and it's starting to gain a lot of traction.
So
of people going, actually, you know what? These are really good.
So I will give you, which I'm sure you probably might have heard of from someone else, but I'll give you our sort of take on how it's performed for Wave 1. Mm-hmm. So as a trader, I'm uniquely positioned to actually see a trend of sales difference between different paint ranges, which not a lot of people get.
Yeah.
So Wave 1 was finally delivered back. I think most of them got it by August, early September time, and then we basically got in the trade range as soon as it was available to us, and nothing sold. I was like, oh, okay. But then I realised, I just thought about it for a bit. I was like, oh, everyone that wanted them has got them. Oh, okay, right, and then
and everybody that might want them hasn't run out of the paint that they've got to need to replace it yet,
or they were waiting, and that waiting period is over. So basically, what I saw from November onwards was a mass uptake of people going, it's not just a name. It's not just Duncan Rhodes.
No, these are actually good.
These are good. And now what we're seeing is people are starting to purchase based upon the feedback from other painters. And now I'm seeing people who had Wave 1, because they're loving it so much and using it so much, they've ran out and are repurchasing the bottles.
Having said that, one thing that I personally am really looking forward to is your range of glazes. Because one thing that I lament what Games Workshop did was they cancelled their line of glazes. And I've watched so many of your earlier Games Workshop tutorials where you're using those glazes, and I'm like,
to make colours more vibrant.
I can't do that. So I'm actually really excited. Was that part of your rationale of actually wanting to introduce the glazes into the range as well? So
yeah, they were because people request them. It's simple as that. So that wasn't part of what we originally intended when we had it fully worked out, like extra to make it a whole inclusive range. But yeah, we just had loads of people saying, could you do this? And we're like, well, I don't see why not. Sure, let's do it. So we actually spent a whole day at the factory fine-tuning those. Because we knew we wanted to stick to because everything's working in threes as it pans out because of the triads and things. So we thought, all right, well, primary and secondary, that works out, 2 sets of 3. That's really cool. So, all right, we'll do that. And yeah, we mixed up as close an approximation of the sort of colour we wanted as we could, and gave it to the factory. Said we'd like it to do this sort of thing, and off they went. The chemist chap there, absolute genius. He was working away at it, and we spent the day playing with it. Okay, could you make it do this a bit more? And I'm not talking about the colour so much. I mean, with the orange, yeah, we had to make the orange more vibrant because it's quite difficult to get just mix a vibrant orange. It tends to go a bit muddy. So he had to do things, I don't know.
Be a chemist.
It's just words. I understand the individual words, just not in the order he says them. It's like, and,
I think he's speaking English.
Yeah, but he'd be doing stuff to the properties of them, rather than the colour, to make it do different things. And we just kept testing it until we were happy with the result it was giving. It's like, brilliant. Off we go.
Nice.
So, the bottle it goes. So all of it's been done with that thing in mind. So, yeah, I'm glad that people are trying them now and seeing the strange, intangible thing I've been trying to say. It really is a range sort of developed by hobbyists, I guess you could say, because I simply wasn't involved with any of the business financial stuff at all. That was just Atlantis, who were literally like, what's your perfect paint? And so, okay, and off they go and make it. And So going back to your question, I'm not sure if that really answers it. That's kind of the story as to how it all came about. What I will say as far as feedback goes, we did find that, so going back to those original bases, the one I picked, basically the mid-tone and the shadow paints had the same kind of base to them, so very similar coverage. The highlight one was a little bit different, which I chose for particular reasons. As it turns out, with particular colours, that meant that the pigment load became very heavy to make it cover, which meant that some of them were really thick. So people might notice things like Gravestone Blue and Vampire Fang in the initial run. They're quite thick. They still thin down and behave just fine, but it's quite thick as they come out of the bottle. We've made some adjustments to those to make them more in line with what the other ones are like. So we picked out specific ones that people were saying were a bit thick and adjusting those. So going forward, you'll see they tone down a little bit, and I think.
So the black is very thin.
Covers really well.
Yes, covers really well, really thin. It's like, I think it was actually a while before I got the black out, because I like vibrant models, so I don't really tend to I'm a AOS player over 40k. I like colourful stuff, so I don't tend to use a lot of black. And then I was using your paints, and then I was like, oh, this is a nice thickness, I can thin it down, blah, and I got the black out and squeezed the same amount as the same pressure. I was like, oh god, it's gone everywhere. But normally most people would probably get black out quite early and realise it.
Yeah, the science behind it is amazing, because all pigments are different. The real strange one is orange, getting that to actually, because you'd think they've got a yellow that covers well and a red that covers well, specifically designed for that purpose. But orange, you can get to a point, but they've not cracked how to make it more the sort of like the coverage of darks and yellow, that sort of thing. They've not quite got to that, and it's nearly there. But it's interesting how you see that and how each one's different, because you think they'll all be the same, right? But they're really not.
No.
There's particular colours they have to do different manufacturing techniques, which essentially result basically it's more expensive to make it, because they have to do more things to the pigment before they actually piece it all together. And then you find out that the actual base itself is a real cocktail of things, because every particular property you want from the paint, there's an ingredient that goes into it to make it do that, but then it has side effects which then have to be counteracted with another chemical. So, for example, you want to break surface tension on the paint so it flows and doesn't bubble up on things, right? So it doesn't behave just like water. So you've got to put in a chemical to break that tension, but that tends to cause things to foam, like washing up liquid, right? So what you're going to do is put something else in to stop that foaming effect, and that has the side effect of it smells awful. So you've got to put something else in to stop that smell, but then that will do something that changes the colour. So and these things just constantly cycle along, and it's like, wow, that's really complicated. I'm not looking at my brushes anymore.
I must admit,
that's what goes into them.
I've had some paints in the past where I've opened them and gone, whoa, whiff.
Yeah. I remember the old Citadel washers were famous for that, weren't they? Before.
Oh yeah.
I wish there was a way of getting the tip
the
nice
Baghdad
and straight
black,
without licking it though, because that's the only. It's just we need to come with a synthetic mouth. No.
Well, it's funny you should say.
Right.